Human voice triggers alien catgirl instinct. Now the alien girl awaits the human. Hello everyone. Before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It's quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now, back to the story. Ethan Carter stood in the dimly lit room, feeling the faint hum of the strange alien technology around him. His task was simple: to assist in the installation of a new intergalactic communication system on the distant planet of Xalora. The planet was known for its extreme weather conditions and strange wildlife. But that wasn't what made this mission unusual. No, it was the presence of Saphira, the alien catgirl, whose species had always intrigued him. She was a member of the Xalorian royal family, and though she was not the ruler, her presence was enough to make the atmosphere around her electric. Ethan had been briefed on the basics. Saphira's species were highly intuitive, with an incredible sensitivity to sound and pheromones, something that made human interaction with them particularly complicated. As he worked, he couldn't help but steal glances at her, noticing how her sharp, golden eyes seemed to follow every movement he made. Her silvery blue fur shimmered under the flickering lights of the installation chamber, and her feline features were both alluring and intimidating. He had heard that the Xalorians had a unique reaction to human voices, but he hadn't realized just how potent it would be. As he spoke to her, explaining the installation process and making small talk, he noticed her expression change. A soft flush seemed to spread across her cheeks, and her pupils dilated, almost as if she were in a trance. Ethan stopped mid-sentence, unsure of what had just happened. "Is everything all right, Saphira?" he asked, his voice laced with concern. She blinked several times, as if waking from a dream. "Yes," she replied, her voice tinged with an unfamiliar softness. "It's just your voice. It does something to me." Ethan was taken aback. He had heard about the Xalorians' heightened sensitivity to sound, but he hadn't expected his voice to have such an immediate effect. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to make you uncomfortable," he said, his words awkward as he fumbled to understand the situation. Saphira's expression softened, and she looked at him with a mixture of curiosity and something deeper. "It's not discomfort," she replied, her voice almost a whisper. "It's a feeling I've never had before." The air between them seemed to thicken, charged with an undeniable tension. Ethan couldn't help but notice how her tail flicked slightly behind her, a subtle sign of her agitation, or perhaps her curiosity. He cleared his throat, trying to regain his composure. "Well, if you need a break or anything, just let me know," he offered, feeling the weight of the situation settle in. Saphira took a step closer to him, her golden eyes never leaving his face. "I think I need to understand this better," she said, her voice low and inviting. Ethan's heart raced as he felt the weight of her gaze. Was this just an alien instinct or something more? He wasn't sure, but one thing was clear. His presence here, his voice, had unlocked something in her, something he wasn't prepared for. And now, Saphira was waiting for him to either acknowledge this strange, new connection or ignore it. As the moments stretched on, Ethan found himself drawn to her, unsure of how to respond but unable to look away. The tension between them had shifted, becoming palpable. He had no idea what would happen next, but for the first time in his life, he felt like he was standing on the edge of something that could change everything. The tension in the room hung thick, almost tangible. Ethan stood frozen, his heart hammering in his chest as Saphira's golden eyes locked onto his, her gaze unblinking. The words she had spoken were still echoing in his mind, and he could feel the weight of her presence more than ever. The way her tail flicked behind her, the way her body subtly leaned closer, it was as though everything around them had faded away. He hadn't expected this, hadn't expected the pull, the attraction. He had assumed this mission would be about installing technology, about the cold, hard work of his job. But now, nothing seemed the same. "Saphira, Ethan started, but his voice faltered. He didn't know what to say. His words felt inadequate for the situation. "You're not like other humans," Saphira said, her voice softer now, filled with a curiosity that seemed almost vulnerable. "I've never met anyone whose voice affects me like this." It's as if something inside me stirs when I hear you speak. Ethan's mind raced as he tried to process what she was saying. Was this just a result of her species' sensitivity to sound? Or was it something deeper, something more personal? He opened his mouth to speak, but she raised a hand, stopping him. It's not just your voice, she continued, her tone growing more earnest. It's you. Your presence. There's something about you that calls to me. It's unlike anything I've ever felt before. Ethan's breath caught in his throat. He had always considered himself a decent guy, smart, capable, but he had never thought of himself as someone who could make an alien princess feel this way. His pulse quickened as he realized that this wasn't just a professional mission anymore. He was being pulled into something much more complex. Saphira, I'm not. I don't know what's going on, he said, the words tumbling out. I'm just a guy. I'm here to do a job. I didn't mean to. I didn't expect to affect you like this. She smiled softly, stepping a little closer, her eyes filled with a warmth that was both unsettling and captivating. You don't have to understand it, she said. But there is something between us, something I can't deny. I've felt it ever since I first heard you speak. Ethan felt a surge of conflicting emotions. He had always prided himself on being in control, on handling situations with logic and reason. But now, standing before Saphira, the alien who seemed to defy everything he thought he knew, he felt utterly out of his depth. Saphira reached out, her delicate hand brushing against his arm, the touch gentle but electric. I've never been able to connect with anyone like this, she whispered. I don't know what to do with it. Ethan could feel his heart racing as he looked down at her, unable to tear his gaze away from her mesmerizing eyes. He could tell that she was being sincere, that this wasn't just some alien game or trick. And yet, he was still unsure how to respond. He had never been one to entertain feelings for someone so different. Maybe we don't have to figure it out right now, he said, his voice a little shaky but steadying. Maybe we can just take things one step at a time. Saphira nodded slowly, a look of quiet understanding in her eyes. One step at a time, she echoed. And in that moment, Ethan realized that his life and the course of this mission had just changed forever. The days that followed were filled with a strange tension. Ethan couldn't help but notice how things had shifted between him and Saphira. Their conversations had become more frequent, and while they still discussed the technical aspects of the installation, there was an underlying sense of something unspoken between them. It wasn't just about the project anymore. It was about the way she looked at him when he spoke, the way her tail moved in response to his gestures, and the way she lingered just a little longer than necessary whenever their hands brushed. One evening, after a long day of work, Ethan found himself sitting at the small table in the corner of the installation room, reviewing some data. The room was dim, with only the soft glow of the holographic screens illuminating the space. He could hear Saphira's soft footsteps as she approached, her presence almost palpable in the quiet. Ethan, she said softly, her voice carrying the weight of a question she hadn't yet asked. He looked up, meeting her gaze, and saw the uncertainty there. Is it strange? She asked, almost hesitantly. What's strange? Ethan replied, genuinely puzzled. This connection between us, she said, taking a step closer. I can't explain it, but I feel something when I'm near you. Something I've never felt before. Ethan's heart skipped a beat. He had felt it too, but the words had been harder for him to articulate. I don't know what it is, he said quietly, standing up and walking over to where she stood. I didn't expect any of this. I came here to do a job, but it's different with you. Saphira tilted her head slightly, her golden eyes studying him intently. I've never met a human like you, she said, her voice soft yet filled with an emotion that was impossible to ignore. You're not like the others. Your voice, the way you look at me, it's different. I don't know how to explain it, but it's strong. Ethan felt a strange flutter in his chest. He had never considered himself special, just an ordinary guy trying to make his way in the universe. But with Saphira, things felt different. The pull he felt when she was near him, the way her presence seemed to fill the space around them, was something he couldn't deny. He reached out, his fingers brushing against her arm. She looked up at him, and for a moment, the world outside the room seemed to disappear. The air between them felt charged, like a spark was just waiting to ignite. I don't know what this is either, he said softly, his voice barely above a whisper. But I want to find out. Saphira's lips curled into a small, tentative smile, and for the first time, Ethan saw a glimmer of hope in her eyes. "I think we both do," she replied. As they stood there, the silence stretched on, but it was no longer awkward. There was an understanding between them, a shared acknowledgement that something had begun. Ethan wasn't sure where it would lead, but for the first time in a long time, he felt like he was on the edge of something important. He didn't know if it was the strange atmosphere of Xalora or the unique bond between humans and aliens, but he couldn't shake the feeling that his life was about to change in ways he couldn't predict. Saphira took a deep breath, her chest rising and falling as she looked up at him, her eyes searching. "I don't know if we're ready for whatever comes next," she said, her voice full of vulnerability. Ethan smiled, his hand gently brushing against her cheek. "Maybe we don't need to be ready," he said. "Maybe we just need to take it one step at a time." And with that, something shifted again. Ethan didn't know what the future held, but he knew one thing for sure. He wasn't alone in this strange, alien world anymore. The next few days were a whirlwind of activity, but for Ethan, everything seemed to be happening in slow motion. His mind constantly returned to the moments he shared with Saphira. The way she looked at him, the warmth in her eyes, and the way her presence seemed to pull him in. It was undeniable that something had changed between them, something neither of them had expected but both could feel. It wasn't just the work that brought them together anymore. It was something deeper, something unspoken. They had both sensed it. Saphira, for her part, had become more open, her usual guarded demeanor slipping away in his presence. She still carried herself with the elegance and poise of royalty, but Ethan could see the vulnerability behind her eyes now, something she had never shown before. On the fifth day, they found themselves once again alone in the installation room, the soft hum of the equipment filling the silence around them. Saphira was looking over the progress of the project, her fingers tracing the holographic screens, but her attention kept drifting back to Ethan. He noticed the subtle changes in her behavior, how she would glance at him when she thought he wasn't looking, how her tail would twitch whenever he spoke. It was all so new. He had never been this close to someone so different, so otherworldly. He found himself getting lost in the way she moved, the fluid grace with which she navigated the room. "Ethan," Saphira said, breaking his reverie. Her voice was soft but firm, as though she had something important to say. He looked up, meeting her gaze. "Yes?" he asked, his voice steady despite the racing thoughts in his mind. "I've been thinking," she began, her tone almost hesitant, "about what you said the other day, about taking things one step at a time." Ethan nodded, unsure of where this conversation was headed. "Yeah, I think that's the right approach," she continued. "But I also think we need to be honest with ourselves about what's happening here. This connection between us, it's not something I can ignore, and I don't want to." Ethan felt a surge of warmth in his chest. He had been wondering the same thing. It was hard to deny the chemistry between them, the way everything felt so easy when they were together. But he had been holding back, unsure of what it all meant. "I don't want to ignore it either," he said, his voice low. "But I think we both need to figure out what this really is. We can't just rush into things." Saphira nodded slowly, a thoughtful expression crossing her face. "I agree," she said softly. "But I don't want to keep pretending like this doesn't matter. Because it does. I feel it, Ethan." Ethan took a deep breath, trying to steady his nerves. This was the moment he had been avoiding, the moment where things could change forever. He had no idea what was going to happen next, but he knew one thing for sure. He didn't want to walk away from this. "I feel it too," he admitted, his gaze never leaving hers. For a long moment, they just stood there, the weight of their words hanging in the air. Ethan could feel his heart pounding in his chest, the realization settling in that this was more than just a passing attraction. This was something deeper, something that could change everything. "Then let's see where it takes us," Saphira said, a smile tugging at the corners of her lips. It was the first time in days that Ethan saw her genuinely smile, and it made his heart skip a beat. He returned her smile, feeling the same sense of relief wash over him. They didn't have all the answers, and they didn't need to rush. For the first time, Ethan felt like they were on the same page. One step at a time, he agreed. And with that, they both knew that this was just the beginning of something that neither of them could fully comprehend yet. But whatever it was, they were going to face it together. The days that followed felt like a blur to Ethan, but they were also strangely calming. He had always been a man of logic, of reason, but when it came to Saphira, He found himself letting go of the structured way he approached everything. He was learning to embrace uncertainty, to allow himself to be pulled into this unexpected connection. Their days were filled with work, but the moments between them, those quiet exchanges when their eyes met or their hands brushed, spoke volumes. Saphira was more than just a royal alien. She was becoming someone he could imagine being with, someone who felt as real as any human. One evening, as the twin suns of Xalora set behind the distant mountains, painting the sky in hues of orange and purple, Ethan found himself sitting next to Saphira on the observation deck of the facility. The air was cool, carrying the scent of the alien flora that surrounded them. There was something peaceful about it, and as Ethan glanced at Saphira, he realized how much. He had come to rely on these moments of calm. Saphira was staring out at the horizon, her silvery hair catching the fading light. "Ethan," she said softly, her voice barely audible over the wind. He turned to her, his heart skipping a beat at the sound of his name from her lips. "Do you ever wonder what would have happened if we never met?" she asked, her gaze still focused on the vast landscape before them. Ethan hesitated. It was a question he had asked himself many times in the past few days, but now that she was here, beside him, it was hard to imagine a life without her. "I think about it," he said, his voice steady but laced with emotion. "But I don't think I want to wonder anymore. I think I'd rather see where this goes." Saphira turned to him then, her golden eyes searching his face. "You're sure?" she asked, her tone serious, but there was a hint of vulnerability in it too. Ethan nodded. "I've never been more sure of anything in my life." Saphira smiled, and in that moment, Ethan felt a warmth spread through him that had nothing to do with the heat of the sun setting on the horizon. It was something deeper, something more meaningful. "Good," she whispered. And for the first time since their arrival on Xalora, Ethan felt like everything was falling into place. The uncertainty, the tension, the confusion, it was all slowly unraveling. They didn't need all the answers. They didn't need to figure everything out right away. All they needed was each other. The moment felt perfect, as if the universe itself had conspired to bring them together. As the last of the sunlight faded behind the mountains, leaving only the stars above, Ethan turned his attention back to Saphira. She was no longer just a stranger from a distant world. She was someone he cared about, someone he wanted to be with, and the realization felt like the most natural thing in the universe. The silence between them stretched, but it wasn't awkward. It was comfortable, filled with the unspoken understanding that they were both here, together, in this moment. Finally, Saphira spoke again, her voice barely above a whisper. "I never thought I would find someone like you," she said. Ethan smiled, his heart swelling. "And I never thought I'd find someone like you," he replied. And for the first time in a long time, everything felt right. They were two beings from different worlds, but in that moment, it didn't matter. What mattered was that they had found each other, and no matter what came next, they would face it together. The days following that quiet evening seemed to blend together in a haze of contentment. Ethan and Saphira's connection deepened, each moment bringing them closer. They shared the space in a way that felt natural, as though the universe had always meant for them to be in each other's lives. They continued working on the installation, but now there was a subtle shift in the air when they were in the same room. Their casual conversations carried more weight, each glance lingering just a little longer. Saphira, the once distant and regal alien, had become someone Ethan could confide in, and he could sense that she felt the same way. One afternoon, while they took a break from the work, they sat together in the small, quiet garden outside the installation room. The sound of distant alien birds and the rustling of leaves in the gentle wind filled the air, and Ethan found himself relaxing more than he ever had before. Saphira looked at him, a thoughtful expression on her face. "You've been quiet today," she remarked softly, her golden eyes studying him. "Is everything all right?" Ethan smiled, his eyes meeting hers. "Yeah, just thinking," he said, his voice thoughtful. "About how much things have changed." "Changed?" Saphira echoed, tilting her head slightly. Ethan nodded. "I came here to do a job, and now I find myself." He paused, struggling to find the right words, feeling things I never expected. Things I don't know how to explain. Saphira leaned in slightly, her expression softening. "I understand," she said, her voice gentle. "I feel it too." Ethan's heart skipped a beat. For so long, He had tried to suppress the feelings that had started to grow between them, unsure of what it all meant. But hearing Saphira admit that she felt the same way made everything feel clearer. "What do we do with this?" Ethan asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Saphira smiled, her eyes reflecting a quiet strength. "We take it one step at a time," she said, her tone steady. "There's no rush. We don't have to have all the answers right now." Ethan nodded, feeling a wave of relief wash over him. He had been so focused on understanding everything, trying to figure out what this connection meant. But now, with Saphira by his side, he realized that he didn't need all the answers. All he needed was to be present, to experience this with her. The air around them seemed to shift again, this time filled with an unspoken understanding. "I think we're on the right path," Ethan said, his voice steady and full of certainty. Saphira reached over and gently placed her hand on his, her fingers cool against his skin. "I think so too," she agreed. The world around them seemed to fade away as they sat in comfortable silence, their hands intertwined. For the first time in a long while, Ethan felt a sense of peace, a sense that everything was falling into place, even if they didn't yet know where that path would lead. "Whatever happens next," Saphira said, breaking the silence, "we face it together. That's all that matters." Ethan looked into her eyes, his heart swelling with emotion. "Together," he repeated, and in that moment, he realized that he didn't need anything more. They had each other, and that was enough. The connection they shared was real, and no matter what challenges lay ahead, they would face them side by side. Days turned into weeks, and the bond between Ethan and Saphira only grew stronger. They continued working on the project, but now there was something else in the air between them, a quiet, unspoken connection that neither could deny. They often found themselves spending time together outside of their work, talking about everything from the most trivial details of daily life to the more profound questions about the universe. There was a comfort in their conversations, a shared understanding that had begun to take root. One evening, after a long day of work, they sat together on the rooftop of the facility, watching the twin moons of Xalora rise above the horizon. The view was breathtaking, the sky painted in shades of blue and purple, with stars twinkling like diamonds scattered across velvet. Ethan could feel the cool night air against his skin, but next to Saphira, the warmth between them kept him at ease. She turned to him, her golden eyes reflecting the soft light of the moons. "Ethan," she said quietly, her voice carrying the weight of something important. He looked at her, his heart skipping a beat as he sensed the change in her tone. "Yes?" he asked, his voice gentle. "I've been thinking," Saphira began, her gaze drifting back to the vast expanse of stars above. "About us. About what we're doing here." Ethan listened intently, his mind racing. He had thought about it too, more than once. He had been wondering where this connection between them was headed, but he had been too afraid to ask. "What do you think?" Ethan asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Saphira smiled softly, her gaze now focused on him. "I think we've both been holding back," she said. "But I also think we don't need to anymore." Ethan's heart raced as he processed her words. The weight of what she was saying settled in, and for the first time, he realized just how much he had been trying to control everything, how much he had been afraid of what this connection meant. But now, with Saphira sitting beside him, her eyes filled with something he couldn't quite describe, he knew that he couldn't hold back anymore. "You're right," he said, his voice steady but filled with emotion. "I've been holding back too, but I don't want it anymore. I don't want to be afraid of what we're building." Saphira reached out and gently took his hand in hers, her cool fingers warm against his skin. "I don't want to be afraid either," she said softly. "I think we've both been afraid of the unknown. But maybe the unknown is where we'll find something we've both been searching for." Ethan nodded, feeling a deep sense of peace settle over him. He didn't have all the answers, and neither did she, but together, they could figure it out. The world around them seemed to fall away as they sat there, hand in hand, watching the stars above. In that moment, everything felt right. "So what happens now?" Ethan asked, his voice filled with curiosity. Saphira smiled, her expression softening. "We take the next step," she said. "Together." And with that, Ethan knew that whatever the future held, they would face it side by side. There was still so much to learn, so much to discover, but for the first time, he wasn't afraid of what lay ahead. He was ready. They both were. As the days passed, Ethan and Sapphira grew even closer. The connection between them, once tentative and uncertain, had now become a bond that neither could deny. They spent more time together, their shared moments outside of work growing in significance. Each time they spoke, there was an unspoken understanding that this wasn't just a fleeting attraction. They were learning about each other in ways neither had anticipated. One evening, they found themselves walking through the alien marketplace of Xalora, a bustling hub of trade and culture. The market was filled with vibrant colors, strange scents, and the hum of countless languages being spoken all around them. Ethan marveled at the alien technology on display, the intricate designs of machines and tools that were far beyond anything he had seen back on Earth. Sapphira walked beside him, her gaze sharp and alert, but there was a softness to her expression when she looked at him, a calm that seemed to settle between them as they navigated the crowded streets. "It's strange, isn't it?" Ethan said, his voice filled with wonder as he took in the sights. "All of this, so different from home." Sapphira nodded, her golden eyes reflecting the glow of the market lights. "It is, but it's also beautiful in its own way. Each world has its own story, its own rhythm. I suppose that's why I find Earth so fascinating. It's unpredictable." Ethan smiled at her words. "I like that about Earth," he said. "It's a little chaotic, but it has its charm." Sapphira chuckled softly. "I think I'm starting to see that." They paused at a stall where a vendor was selling shimmering fabrics, their colors shifting as they caught the light. Sapphira reached out, touching one of the fabrics, her fingers gliding over it. "This is from my home planet," she said. "We use it for ceremonial robes. It's rare, even by Xalorian standards." Ethan glanced at her, a spark of curiosity in his eyes. "Ceremonial robes? What kind of ceremonies do you have?" Sapphira hesitated for a moment, her gaze turning inward. "Rituals of passage," she said quietly. "Coming of age, marking the beginning of new chapters in our lives. They are important, but they are also reminders of how far we've come and what we must still learn." There was a weight to her words, a depth that Ethan hadn't expected. He looked at her, sensing there was more to the story. "And what about you, Sapphira?" he asked, his voice gentle. "What have you learned so far?" She met his gaze, her golden eyes searching his face as if weighing her words carefully. "I've learned that nothing is ever truly as simple as it seems," she said slowly. "That sometimes, the most unexpected connections can change everything. I never thought I'd meet someone like you." Ethan's heart skipped a beat at her words. He felt the warmth of her presence, the sincerity in her voice, and it made everything feel more real than ever before. "I never thought I'd meet someone like you either," he replied, his voice low but filled with meaning. They stood there for a moment, the world around them fading away as they shared a quiet understanding. The bustling marketplace, the strange alien technologies, and the vibrant colors all seemed to melt into the background. All that mattered in that moment was the quiet certainty that they had found something worth holding on to. "We've still got a lot to figure out," Ethan said softly, breaking the silence. "But I think we're on the right path." Sapphira nodded, her expression softening. "I believe that too," she said. "One step at a time, right?" Ethan smiled at her, feeling the weight of her words settle deep in his chest. "Yeah, one step at a time." And for the first time, he wasn't afraid of the unknown. With Sapphira by his side, he felt ready to face whatever the future held, knowing that they would face it together. The next few weeks were filled with a sense of growing understanding and companionship. Ethan and Sapphira continued to work together, their bond strengthening with each passing day. They spent more time talking, laughing, and learning from each other. Sapphira shared stories of her home planet, the customs and traditions of her people, and the struggles she had faced as part of a royal family. Ethan, in turn, told her about his life on Earth, the challenges of growing up, and the dreams he had of exploring the stars. The connection between them deepened, and though neither of them was certain of where this journey would take them, they knew they were in it together. One evening, as they walked through the quiet corridors of the facility, Ethan felt a sense of calm he hadn't experienced in a long time. The weight of his past had been slowly lifting, replaced by something more hopeful. Sapphira walked beside him, her presence reassuring in its familiarity. "You've been quiet tonight," Sapphira remarked, glancing at him with curiosity. Ethan smiled, shaking his head. "Just thinking about everything," he said, his voice soft. About how much has changed in such a short time. Saphira nodded, her golden eyes searching his face. I know what you mean, she said. I've been thinking a lot too. About us. About what we're building here. Ethan stopped walking for a moment, turning to face her. You know, I've never really believed in fate or destiny, he said, his voice steady but filled with emotion. But with you, Saphira, I don't know. It feels like we were meant to meet. Like this was always supposed to happen. Saphira's expression softened, and she placed her hand on his. I feel the same way, she said quietly. I've never been sure of anything before, but with you, it feels different. It feels right. Ethan's heart swelled with affection as he looked at her, the weight of her words settling deep within him. We're figuring this out, one step at a time, he said, his voice filled with certainty. And that's enough for me. Saphira smiled, her golden eyes reflecting the warmth of her feelings. It's enough for me too, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. They stood there for a moment, the quiet of the evening enveloping them, and Ethan realized that no matter what challenges lay ahead, they would face them together. There was a peace in knowing that, a comfort in the certainty of their connection. As the days turned into weeks, and the weeks into months, their bond only grew stronger. They continued their work, exploring the mysteries of Xalora and sharing experiences that neither could have predicted. And through it all, they remained by each other's side, navigating the unknown together. They didn't have all the answers, but they didn't need to. All they needed was each other, and in that, they had everything they could ever need.